If the Thrawn trilogy expanded the Star Wars universe politically, the Corellia trilogy expanded it historically and geographically. My name's Dan. I'm going through the Star Wars expanded universe for my first time. I'm having a blast with it. I'm going in publication order to try to experience it as close as I can in the same way as the fans who were there from the very beginning did, to see how the story evolved over time more than anything else. Now, I am enjoying it. I will have opinions over certain series or books over the other. And, that'll always just be baked into it. But if you like this, stick around to the journey. The playlist of the publication order is the best way to sort of see it cleanly laid out. It's still developing, but right now we are in the Bantam era. Just really quickly, this top shelf here is the classic era. That's just what I've called it, or the original era of Star Wars in the 70s and the 80s. There were these books here, and then these two shelves, or this shelf here, and then the two shelves here is the Bantam era, starting with Thrawn and onward. This is 1991, and it takes us all the way to 1999, and then that will be where the prequel era, the Del Rey era begins. So right now, we are in 1995 with these three books from March to October. That would slot them into this first shelf, kind of in between there. There were some other books that were published in between some of these. We'll get to those next, but I wanted to make sure that I gave my thoughts on these as a trilogy, and there are some things to say. Now, the first thing that should be really obvious when holding up this first book, the name here, the name of the trilogy, this is Han's home system, and so we finally get to visit it. We get to see its roots there. It becomes real for the first time. Along with his homeworld, which clearly influenced Han growing up, there are the humans that live there. There are Solonians, which are almost like otter or badgers, sort of tall creatures. And there are the Drawl, which are short little furry creatures. And so we have a couple more alien species to get to know, and I'm always for that. And they also inhabit this Corellian system. One of the great things about this trilogy is that it is a Han-centric trilogy. The other characters are in there, but this is very much about Han. In the Han Solo adventures that Brian Daley wrote, which I loved, there wasn't as much of an arc with Han. He kind of had to be occupied. Here we could see a new Han. He has children now with Leia, and he's a parent. This is more about him flying around with Chewie, trying to get a big score. Identity plays a big role in this, going back home, his family, his life, and you can feel as there is strife happening and unrest happening in his home world and his home system. You can feel that he is bothered by this, and we get that aspect of Han. One of the great things about this trilogy is this is the first time I've really felt the children feeling developed. We got some of that in the Jedi Academy trilogy, but they were so young. The Crystal Star, we started to see their distinctive personalities a bit, but this is where they really start to shine. Anakin is really the standout here, and then Jaina and Jacen, his older twin brother and sister, also are great, and they have their distinctive things. But Anakin being this almost savant with technology, he really shines here, and each of these children do. This is very much future protagonists. For the first time, I could see these as people that I could really spend a whole book with, and they aren't throwaway side characters as I might have felt they were in Jedi Academy. They're much more fleshed out here, and I think they're great. I don't want to go into what Centerpoint Station is necessarily for this, but it really does enrich the history of the galaxy and what is possible with forming the galaxy itself, or shaping it, so to speak. I don't want to go much further into that. One of the things that is very strange about things so far is we're not very far into the Star Wars universe. It has been a couple decades, but relative to how many books have already come out, we have these names so far, starting with we've had a Star Destroyer, we've had, Star Destroyers, Death Stars, Sun Killers, Starbusters, and I wonder what's next, like a planet mulcher or a galaxy waster. We just have all these super weapons, and that's a little bit samey, and so people's mileage will vary going into the trilogy there. We still have another sort of super weapon, but it does sort of it has some interesting features about it that are not necessarily only about shining a big laser at a planet or a star and blowing it up, even though the end result is largely the same. This trilogy felt a little bit more layered in a lot of ways than some of the stuff that we've got before it. They're really trying to stretch out and enlarge what is not known. Some of what we've had before is just laying out the cards and explaining the lore from before. But it feels like Roger Allen McBride is sort of planting some seeds for future authors to harvest later on. He doesn't give all the answers of things when they talk about the old republic and things that happened here. And there are things where we still don't know why certain places exist and certain technology and things. I like when it keeps that open. And I can only imagine that we will have some of this stuff referenced in the future, I'm sure. One of the things that is really featured in this trilogy that I think is the best showcased in the first book, that was my favorite book of the three, is the regional politics of the system. We have the humans, the Drawl, the Solonians. There are some people that just want to get along, but there are definitely anarchists and agitators within each of these groups, and everything's sort of popping off. And we can see how the New Republic isn't always going to be able to just go in and fix everything with force, or even with sending an ambassador to save the day. Really, they have to be a little bit more nuanced to make sure that they don't fall into the same sort of pattern as the Empire. So I think that was explored quite well in the trilogy, even if, the trilogy could have been one big book or condensed down and would have been just as good, but that's a different point. I do think the politics here was quite compelling, and the mystery was quite compelling. It was grounded. Really, the fantasy elements of things like the Force kind of sat in the back seat. It doesn't feel really magical here. It feels like a classic sci-fi. I like that sort of thing. I was kind of relishing some big sci-fi duel at some point, but I was appreciating that this was just staying at a regional level, and it wasn't about Sith and Jedi on the system to begin with. And it's not like just throwing a Jedi in to wield his lightsaber is going to save the day. I really appreciate that. There are massive contributions, I think most to the characters like Lando, who finally feels like he gets an arc away from just being a womanizing swindler. Going into this, one of the big side stories that start the whole trilogy is Lando trying to marry into money. And so, he wants to marry into money so that he can make even more money if he just had that initial big kind of lump sum to deal with. And so he has an amazing arc. I loved Lando. We had Lando, again, it's the same sort of thing which happened in the Han Solo adventures, where he was just occupied, and I really liked those, but there weren't much of an arc with that. Same with the Lando Calrissian adventures. Not a huge arc with those three books. Here, I feel like finally Lando has reached a new stage in the EU, I think. And so I'm looking forward to seeing if that continues to develop. Another person who is very much served in this trilogy is Leia as a stateswoman. I'll leave it at that, but she is continuing to learn that she can't just go in and always just talk her way through things. Politics is messy, and Star Wars politics is messy, and I like that. Luke Skywalker is also served here as a continuing Jedi Master. He's left his students at the Academy to continue to grow. We have more than 1 year's worth of students there. Some of the first years, or the former first years, are now teaching the new first years and the second years and things. And so they're all kind of learning together. He's trying not to be a distraction there. And so now, one of the things that also is built up here is that Mon Mothma has told him that he needs to start learning to be a little bit more like Leia and get her skills in politics and things, because believe it or not, whether he likes it or not, he's Luke Skywalker. People know who he is. He's going to be called on. And so he needs to learn how to use his voice and be an ambassador. And on the other hand, we have Leia, who really needs to learn to cultivate the Jedi abilities that she has within her. And so that cross is very interesting here, where we have Luke, especially with books 2 and 3. I will just say, I don't really want to mention where, how it happens that Luke kind of cultivates that, but it is a major callback earlier on in the publication order. I loved that I got to see some characters that I already knew. We've learned a lot of things in this publication order so far. In the Thrawn trilogy, we learned that the Empire doesn't just go away so easily. We also learned the same sort of thing in the Truce at Bakura, but also that there are more threats out there. In the Courtship of Princess Leia, we learned that other political alliances are very important. In the Jedi Academy, the Jedi return. In the Crystal Star, we learned that the galaxy can be much stranger than we could even possibly imagine. And in the Corellian Trilogy, the New Republic has to be very careful in how they choose to govern. I think it was pretty good. If I had to say, the first book was my favorite. My height for it was very, very high up. The second 2 books were a little more boring to me, but overall, I'm still very positive on this. I think it had a great antagonist, a couple different antagonists. One especially that I don't want to give away, that is found within the Corellian system itself. There are sci-fi sort of features that are expanded within this trilogy, and concepts that I think were interesting involving the hyperdrives and things like that. I don't really want to talk much more into that either, just in case people want to go read it. I think it was interesting. It wasn't my very favorite stop in the expanded universe, but I've liked it pretty well the whole way through. The next stop on the list will be, I think it's called the Callista Trilogy, which begins with Children of the Jedi and goes to Darksaber. And then actually later on in the publishing, we have Planet of Twilight. So this is a trilogy that has 3 different authors. I don't know if I'm going to read all of them at once, or if I'm going to wait until naturally in the publication order. Maybe you can give me your thoughts on that. Also, we have the tales of the tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina coming up. So let me know what you think I should do about these 3 books. I will either start with Children of the Jedi or Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina next. And so let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you down in the comments below. Bye.